This is Savannah Burton. She wants to be Canada's first transgender woman to compete on a team internationally. 2 years ago, she played on the men's team.
My name is Savannah Burton. I'm 40 years old, and I'm an amateur athlete and trans woman. Competing as a woman means the world to me because I can finally play and compete as myself.
Savannah Burton wants to throw like a girl. That's because ever since she can remember, she's wanted to be one.
I remember when I was maybe 4 or 5 years old, I said it out loud. I said, I am a girl.
But nobody heard Savannah. So she grew up a boy, in a boy's body with a boy's name. But she's asked us not to use it because little boys who want to be little girls in small-town Newfoundland had a hard time growing up.
So I kept it all internal. I didn't share it with anybody. It was I was not a very social person. I was kept to myself a lot.
Savannah grew up in Corner Brook, a city of less than 20,000. The pulp mill and fishing kept people employed. The only place she ever felt good was on the baseball field.
Once you're focused on something, like baseball, you're not really thinking about all your problems. You can kind of just push that aside for a few hours while you're out playing sports. I used to play right here. That was my position.
I can see you there now.
Savannah's mom, Bonnie, remembers the good times watching her play ball and quickly moving up the ranks.
It was very exciting. I loved watching her play baseball. And I loved the game. I guess that's when I first got to like baseball, actually, her and her brother were only like 6 and 7 or something when they started.
By her teens, Savannah was becoming a local baseball star, and there was talk of her turning pro. But her mother knew something was holding her back.
I guess I always knew that there was something that wasn't right in Savannah's life, but I didn't know what it was. And I couldn't get her to tell me what it was.
Cam Neely, Sergei Fedorov.
Savannah was also passionate about hockey. Collecting cards was a good distraction from life.
Still in pretty good shape. Yeah, they were actually in really good shape. Yeah, I should have sold it when it was worth $100.
Savannah's decided to pass on her card collection to her nephew. Her brother Rick knew she was having trouble growing up.
I knew that at the time, my brother was just not happy with who he was. But like I said, it did kind of maybe keep us apart a little bit more, I guess, because I know she wanted to just stay in a room, or downstairs we had a family room with a TV.
Savannah would spend hours alone watching TV. Then she saw a talk show that would change her life.
I noticed that there were a couple of trans women on the show. And this was the first time I'd really seen that I saw myself in that show. It was a huge eye-opening experience. It's possible. It's not just something that is unattainable.
So at age 20, Savannah decided to take a trip, to drive over 2,000 kilometers.
I packed up my car and I said, I'm going to move to Toronto and become a woman. That was kind of like the first really big step in my life.
But Savannah didn't become a woman in Toronto. After a couple months, she moved back to Newfoundland.
It was completely overwhelming. Growing up in a small town, Corner Brook, Newfoundland, it was a completely different world. Moving to Toronto, it was a huge city. I didn't really have a plan.
It took 10 years before Savannah had the courage to move back to Toronto and stay for good. but she still struggled with her decision to transition. So she turned to sports to help her cope.
A good friend of mine said that she plays in a dodgeball league. And I was thinking back from my baseball background that I could still throw really well. I was probably in the best shape of my life at that time. I wanted to get back into playing sports, and I thought dodgeball sounds like a lot of fun.
Once again, Savannah, still living as male, excelled at sports. She got so good at dodgeball, she joined Canada's national men's team. In 2012, they won silver at an international tournament in Malaysia. But after the big win, the feelings of wanting to be a woman came rushing back.
I was always very quiet. I was always very awkward socially just because I wasn't comfortable. And being into my 30s and not being comfortable in social situations, I just got to a point where it's like, okay, I'm not happy. I've never really been happy. I need to do this. I need to transition.
When we return, Savannah transitions from male to female, but at what cost?
I may lose everything if I transition, but I still had to do it.
For all her life, Savannah Burton competed in sports. For most of that time, she played as male. She even won silver for Team Canada, competing in dodgeball. But at age 38, she decided to transition from male to female. The first step was physically changing her appearance, but that was easier said than done.
It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do is to get dressed as present as a woman and go out publicly. I was so nervous, I wasn't sure if I was going to even do it. It took me probably an hour just to get outside the door or whatever.
Over time, Savannah's confidence grew, and she built up a close group of transgender friends. By age 39, she decided to compete in sports again. She wasn't ready to go back to dodgeball, but in the spring of 2014, she tried rowing.
Nobody knew me in rowing, which I kind of thought it would make it easier. It's kind of like a clean slate. I could go in there and not have to be around people, I guess, that knew my history. So that was a big thing for me and the big reason why I did rowing.
In the end, she and Enza Anderson decided to do a rowing half marathon. They became Canada's first transgender athletes to compete. They finished the 22 kilometers in 2 hours and 8 minutes.
Good job, way to go!
Savannah's parents flew to Ottawa to cheer her on. By now, they had accepted her decision to transition.
It makes me so happy, and I'm so proud of her.
Savannah's mother may have accepted her transition, but not everyone is as accepting. With her size and strength, Savannah shows great promise in rowing. But according to Rowing Canada, she's not allowed to compete for Canada as a woman. CEO Donna Atkinson says that's because they follow the International Olympic Committee, or IOC, rules.
The IOC rules came into effect in 2004. They basically state that an athlete has to be recognized by their own country in the gender that they want to compete in. They have to have undergone sexual reassignment surgery and be at least 2 years under hormone treatment.
Savannah has never had sex reassignment surgery or legally changed her gender. But she has had 2 years of hormone therapy. That was done at Sherbourne Health Centre. They won't talk about her case specifically, but they treat lots of transgender women like Savannah, according to her nurse, Rebecca Hammond.
So the average medication regime, I guess you could call it, that we would provide to trans women would be a androgen blocker or a T blocker, testosterone blocker. So we give it for trans women to help reduce the effects of testosterone. We also give estrogens of various types. some of the changes that happen. So things like breast development, the redistribution of fat, the decrease in body hair.
According to Rebecca, another big change will affect Savannah's performance in sports.
Generally, things like strength decreases over time, and we talk about this. If people have jobs where they need strength, if people are, reliant on physical strength, particularly grip strength and upper body strength, you're going to see a decrease with that, with the effects of testosterone being taken away.
I certainly wasn't as strong as I used to be. I don't throw as hard as I used to. My muscles are not, they're just not as strong, they're not as big. It's kind of frustrating in a way, but I mean, it's just part of being a woman.
But hormone therapy isn't enough to compete as female. The IOC requires sex reassignment surgery, the removal of penis and testicles to create a vagina.
Yeah, I think that the guidelines for the IOC are inherently transphobic.
They're saying that it has an advantage physically or an advantage with respect to performance, which is not the case. Trans women, after 2 years of hormone replacement therapy, do not have any advantage whatsoever.
The controversy over women's unfair advantage in sports goes back decades. It began in 1938 when German high jumper Dora Heinrich-Retjen nearly won bronze at the Olympics, until it was discovered she was biologically male. For years, the IOC tested women to confirm their gender. Then, in 2003, they came out with an official policy for transgender athletes, requiring them to have sex reassignment surgery. A Canadian cyclist was the first transitioned athlete to qualify to compete as female. But now that she can, she no longer wants to. Forcing someone to have surgery is wrong, according to Kristen Worley.
Telling a young person to ride their bike, to run around a track, to row a boat, or kick a ball, this is what they have to do to their body to participate, to be accredited to participate. It's unethical.
Kristen says she has the science to back her up. For the last year and a half, she's monitored her body to show what can happen after sex reassignment surgery. She says without any testosterone, she's not only at a disadvantage in sports, but she's been left with serious medical problems.
I don't have the testicles to produce the hormones that are required to help with recovery, muscle development. The main functions like bone health, mental health, sexual health, all these things. What the IOC is asking somebody, you're taking away, you're making somebody unwell. You're actually creating, you're debilitizing the body, or you're creating a disability.
Feeling pretty good?
Yeah.
How's your blood pressure been? Have you been checking it at home like I asked you to?
Yeah.
Any issues or concerns?
I don't think so.
Dr. Karis Massarella is a transgender woman and emergency room physician. She says sex reassignment surgery is not only dangerous, it can be deadly.
There is a risk that you can die in surgery. A completely healthy person will show up, and about 1 in 10,000 times they'll die. If you look at post-op complications, you can develop blood clots. You can develop what are called abscesses. You can develop skin tissue loss. You can develop what we call fistulas, where there's literally a fistula between the new vagina and the bowel, which can cause leakage of bowel contents through the neovagina. And I'm not speculating. I've seen all of these complications related to transgender surgeries. So in fact, again, you're forcing somebody to have a surgery, which in my opinion is not necessary, in order to so-called level the playing field. Because in fact, we're not leveling the playing field. What we're actually doing is forcing people to have a surgery, which in no way improves or makes the playing field more level. In fact, in my opinion, it actually makes it harder for trans women to compete.
The International Olympic Committee declined to be interviewed for this documentary. When we return, Savannah faces a tough choice: have sex reassignment surgery or never compete for Canada again. At age 38, Savannah Burton transitioned from male to female. She took hormones for 2 years and went back to competing in sports as a woman. But the International Olympic Committee, or IOC, said if she wants to compete for Canada, she has to have sex reassignment surgery. Savannah refused and decided to play for her local dodgeball league as a woman.
Going back to dodgeball and competing as a woman, when they had known me for so long, I didn't know how they were going to take it. I was really nervous.
When Savannah showed up to play as a woman, she was surprised by the reaction.
When I first heard about your transition, I wasn't sure if you were gonna come back to dodgeball and if I was gonna, because I know you, I hadn't seen you for about a year or two. So I was really glad that Luke was wanting to come back and play with us.
With the support of her local league, Savannah decided to try out for Team Canada again. When she competed as male in 2012, she won silver at an international tournament in Malaysia. But this time, she wanted to compete as a woman.
It was an opportunity, and I like to think that now, this point in my life, I like to seize opportunities when it arises.
She even checked with the International Dodgeball Federation to see what their policy was for transgender athletes. And she was told their rules are different than the IOC's.
I heard that the only thing I would need was that I would have to have identification that had female on it.
But getting female ID isn't as easy as Savannah had hoped. Her birth certificate still says she's male. If she wants to get that changed, she'll have to get it done in Newfoundland. And according to lawyer Kyle Reese, their rules just happen to be the same as the IOC's.
To get that changed birth certificate, the government here will require you to undergo the surgery and then go to a doctor and have a doctor examine you in some way and fill out an affidavit that says, yes, you've undergone that surgery. And then the government will issue you that changed piece of identification.
So Savannah has launched a human rights case against the Newfoundland government. She wants to get her ID changed without surgery. She doesn't want anything to stand in her way of playing on Team Canada.
That would be awful. I would feel terrible about that. I can't imagine that I would be denied the ability to play sports because of my government not doing the right thing.
But Savannah's decided not to wait for her government to do the right thing. Instead, she went to the national team tryouts where 8 women were chosen to represent Canada. And lo and behold, Savannah was one of them.
I was really excited, probably more excited with respect to anything else that I've ever done in sports. I feel this really big sense of accomplishment that I was able to do this. I'm being myself. I'm not pretending to be something I'm not anymore.
As a warm-up to the international tournament, Savannah competes at Canadian Nationals. The 3-day tournament is the largest dodgeball event in North America, and their rules for transgender athletes are even more welcoming.
Right now, our policy is anybody can compete in any division that they see themselves in. So if you see yourself as female, you compete in the female division. If you see yourself as male, compete in the male division.
The open policy is one thing, but this is the first time many players will be seeing Savannah as a woman. She's afraid how they're going to react.
I wasn't sure what to expect, but I haven't had any problems at all. Everybody's been really nice. I've been having a lot of good conversations with people, and everybody coming and saying hi, and competition is great, and I'm really enjoying being here.
Savannah's also enjoying winning. By the end of the second day, she's undefeated. But some women are finding her team has an unfair advantage.
They're a good team. That one girl has a really good throw. It's hard to predict.
Super accurate and hard throws.
Well, there was one girl that could underpitch, which is crazy.
That unfair advantage isn't Savannah, but her teammate Jocelyn Brewer. Unlike the other players, she throws underarm, and many are finding it difficult to play against her. It helps get Savannah's team all the way to the finals, but that's as close as she would get.
In the women's division,
Her team loses the final game, and she has to settle for second best.
We played really well. I couldn't be more prouder of our team. I think we showed great heart. We played amazing. We made it to the finals, and we lost to an incredibly strong team, returning champions from last year.
But that's not Savannah's only disappointment today. Although this national competition has been very open to transgender athletes, she has no idea that the president of the International Dodgeball Federation, Bill Fair, has just adopted the IOC policy.
So for the first time ever, we have an applicant that's actually a transgender athlete. And so being that this is the first time that we've had an applicant, we actually had to research and look up to see if there was any sort of precedent set for transgender athletes. And so that's when we came across the Olympic policies. And we decided to adopt that, being that that looked like the best format to use.
So that means Savannah will need to have sex reassignment surgery if she wants to compete for Canada.
So I'm sorry to hear that. It's difficult to hear that, and hopefully they would consider changing their minds. They're saying that it has an advantage physically or an advantage with respect to performance, which is not the case. Trans women, after 2 years of hormone replacements therapy, do not have any advantage whatsoever. That is inherently discriminatory, so I would definitely have to fight that.
And Savannah does fight and wins big. In May, she convinces the International Dodgeball Federation to change their policy. They agree to drop the IOC rule requiring sex reassignment surgery. Now, she's free to become Canada's first transgender woman to compete